There is a crop that quietly defies every rule modern agriculture wants you to believe. A plant that grows where others fail. A plant that doubles potato yields without asking for irrigation or fertilizer. A plant that shrugs at cold that kills wheat. And the most dangerous part, once you plant it, you never need to buy seed again. It reproduces itself endlessly, season after season, generation after generation. This plant was once humanity's insurance policy against starvation. Entire villages depended on it. Entire cultures worshipped it. It kept people alive when empires fell, when wars burned nations down, when winter swallowed whole continents. It was never abandoned because it failed. It was abandoned because it succeeded too well. A crop that feeds the poor, for free as an enemy to any system, built on selling survival back to you. This is the perennial that outlasted kings, survived 2 world wars, and still grows unnoticed beneath your feet. This is the sunroot, the sunchoke, the forgotten powerhouse buried by history, by war, and by the demands of profit. And before we open nature's lost vault, if these stories matter to you, if you believe that forgotten knowledge deserves a voice, then share this vault, because memory disappears when we stop repeating it. The archive opens on the eastern shores of North America in the year 1605. Samuel de Champlain steps onto a coastline that will one day be called Massachusetts. The Algonquin people welcome him, not with fear, not with caution, but with a feast. Among the dishes is a strange knobby root they call kaishukpanak, sunroot. Champlain tastes it, and he writes in his journal that it rivals Europe's prized artichoke. He fills his ship with tubers and sails back across the Atlantic. But the sunroot story began long before Champlain ever took a bite. Native nations of the Great Lakes and the eastern woodlands had cultivated it for thousands of years. The Iroquois told a creation story. When Earth Woman died giving birth to her twin sons, Sapling and Flint, the first sunroots grew from her feet, food born from sacrifice, meant to nourish future generations. The plant itself is spectacular. A towering sunflower 8 to 10 feet tall, bright yellow blossoms following the sun. But the true treasure lies underground. Clusters of knotted tubers storing energy as inulin, not starch. These tubers could be eaten raw, crisp like water chestnuts, roasted until sweet, boiled until soft, dried into flour that lasted through brutal winters. Once planted, they multiplied endlessly. Tribes didn't need to replant every season. The roots spread on their own through a living network of rhizomes beneath the soil. One patch could feed a village endlessly. In 1805, when Lewis and Clark were starving in the Dakotas, Sacagawea saved them. She dug into mouse caches, retrieving thousands of sunroots stored underground for winter. She roasted them over fire and kept the expedition alive. That tiny root carried them across a continent. Sunroots produce staggering yields. A single plant could give 3 to 6 pounds of food. An acre produced more calories than wheat, more than corn in cold climates. Centuries later, university trials proved what indigenous farmers already knew. Over 60,000 pounds per acre without irrigation. Potatoes, even in ideal conditions, barely reached 53,000, and only with irrigation. Europe should have embraced this miracle. In 1605, Europe was dying of hunger. Fields were exhausted. Famine struck cities every few years. People feared potatoes, believing they caused leprosy, but the sunroot needed no convincing. It spread like a blessing across France and Italy. It grew without effort, without fertilizer, without cost. A root the poor could rely on when everything else failed. Yet cracks appeared. The tubers were irregular, harder to wash, harder to store. They spoiled quickly. They weren't compatible with the warehouses, markets, and tax systems that Europe depended on. The potato fit the system. The sunroot did not. The potato could be standardized, controlled, stockpiled, taxed. The sunroot resisted every attempt at containment. By the mid-1700s, the potato became the chosen crop. The sunroot was pushed aside, labeled food for the poor, animal feed, a weed. European settlers arriving in North America ignored indigenous food wisdom and filled their fields with wheat and potatoes. Crops that forced them to buy seed each year. Crops that locked them into economic dependency. The sunroot survived in ditches, roadsides, forgotten corners. Then war reshaped everything. In World War I, Germany collapsed under Allied blockade. The winter of 1916 became known as the turnip winter. People ate. Frost damaged livestock feed because potatoes had failed. Sunroots growing wild saved some families. They could not be blockaded. They could not be confiscated. They waited underground. World War II was worse. In France, Nazis seized 80% of all food. Potatoes, wheat, and butter were shipped to feed German soldiers. What remained for French families were scraps, rutabagas, weeds, and sunroots. For 9 long years, millions survived on tubers they despised. Sunroots were small, knobby, hard to clean, hard to digest. They caused gas in people unused to them. But they kept children alive. They kept resistance fighters alive. They kept entire villages alive. In the Netherlands, during the hunger winter of 1944, 22,000 people starved. Governments printed emergency cookbooks listing edible wild plants, tulip bulbs, tree bark, and sunroots. Families dug frozen ground with bare hands searching for tubers. After liberation, nobody wanted to see a sunroot again. An entire generation associated it with suffering, humiliation, occupation, starvation. In France, grandparents refused to allow it on the table. The vegetable that saved millions became a symbol of misery and death. It disappeared from cuisine, from farms, from memory. But the sunroot itself never changed. Nutritionally, it is a powerhouse. 73 calories per 100 grams, rich in potassium, iron, copper, magnesium, B vitamins, and most importantly, inulin, one of the richest natural sources on Earth. Inulin bypasses digestion, reaching the colon intact, feeding beneficial bacteria like bifidobacteria. These microbes produce short-chain fatty acids that strengthen immunity, improve mineral absorption, and may even protect against colon cancer. Potatoes spike blood sugar. Sunroots do not. Inulin converts slowly to fructose. In the 1980s, diabetics wrote letters saying they ate sunroots daily and needed half as much insulin. Folk medicine, validated by science. The plant heals land too. As a perennial, it requires no tilling, prevents erosion, and tolerates drought, poor soil, and extreme cold. In other words, it's built for a future where climate stability is collapsing. In the 1960s, a California produce wholesaler named Frida Kaplan looked at crates of unsellable tubers with a terrible name, Jerusalem artichoke. It wasn't from Jerusalem, and it wasn't an artichoke. The Italian word girasole, sunflower, had morphed into Jerusalem. Kaplan renamed it sunchoke and trademarked it. Sales shot up 600%. Chefs rediscovered it. Restaurants served sunchoke soup, roasted roots, creamy purees. During the 1980s farm crisis, when Midwest farmers were going bankrupt, some turned to sunroots as a possible escape from corporate seed dependency. The plant had everything: high yield, perennial growth, ethanol potential. But no market, no processing systems, no support. The experiment failed economically, not agriculturally. Still, the idea persisted. A crop for communities that want independence from corporate agriculture. In France, chefs reclaimed the vegetable under its old name, topinambour, celebrating it instead of hiding it. By the 2000s, farmers' markets across North America and Europe filled with sunchokes again. Permaculturists called them the Holy Grail, the plant you can plant once and harvest forever. So why isn't it everywhere? Because modern agriculture rewards obedience, not resilience. It wants crops that mature on a schedule, grow in rows, submit to machines, store for months, and look uniform on shelves. Sunroots refuse. They mature unevenly. They spoil quickly. Machines can't harvest them without losing half the tubers. They don't scale cleanly. They don't profit easily. And then there's the inulin problem. The nutrient that makes them exceptional also makes them difficult for beginners to digest. Modern consumers want instant convenience, not adaptation, not patience. So the sunroot stays niche. But the truth is simple. Its uncontrollable nature is precisely why it survived 4 centuries of attempts to erase it. You cannot kill sunroots without poison. Every fragment sprouts. They invade fields, ditches, riversides. Europeans call them invasive, a word humans use for anything that succeeds without needing permission. The sunroot exposes the illusion of control. It grows without fertilizers, without corporations, without yearly seed purchases. It breaks the economic model of industrial agriculture, and anything that refuses to generate perpetual profit gets labeled primitive, inconvenient, or irrelevant. This pattern isn't new. Amaranth was banned by conquistadors for being sacred and too resilient. Teepery beans were abandoned because machines couldn't handle them. Mesquite forests were destroyed for cattle that ruined the soil. Broad beans were replaced by pills that cost hundreds of dollars. Indigenous foods that support sovereignty are erased not because they fail, but because they succeed without chains. The sunroot survived because it is stubborn, wild, unkillable, but most people alive today have never eaten one. They've never even seen one grow. They don't know that planting 3 tubers in autumn can yield 30 by spring. The knowledge sits underground, waiting. Climate instability is already reshaping the world. Droughts, heat waves, floods, soil collapse. The crops feeding billions were bred for stability. That stability is ending. But the sunroot was born in chaos. It thrives in conditions that kill wheat and corn. It stores energy deep where drought cannot touch. It produces more food using a fraction of the water. When the industrial systems fail, and they will, the sunroot will still be standing, patient, underground, waiting for hands that remember. French families survived a Nazi occupation because of this root they hated. Dutch parents kept children alive through starvation winters because of it. Native Americans honored it as a gift grown from the feet of Earth Woman herself. Cultures vanish. Names change. Stories fade. But the plant refuses to die. We did not lose the sunroot. We lost our memory of it. But forgetting is never final. The knowledge lives in the soil, in the wild patches along forgotten roads, in the stubborn tubers that refuse to disappear. It waits for anyone willing to dig, anyone ready to remember what abundance looks like without permission, without profit, without fear. If this vault opens something inside you, share it, like it, subscribe, because every time this knowledge is repeated, another layer of forgetting is stripped away, another truth returns to the world, and the next vault is already waiting.